Welcome, everyone, to the Amplify Speakers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sund, and today I'm very excited for the guests we have. Today's guest is LaPora Lindsay. She is a workplace development expert, she's a keynote speaker, and she's the author of Bottom of the Food Chain. She's based in Omaha, Nebraska, and is known for challenging how organizations define leadership, engagement, and contribution, especially for the people doing important work without the title or authority. With nearly 2 decades of experience across global industries, LaPora helps organizations uncover why capable employees disengage, burn out, or stay invincible, and how systems can be redesigned so meaningful contribution is actually seen and valued. Her work reframes leadership as a set of behaviors rather than a job title, equipping professionals to influence, lead, and create impact from any seat in the organization. Please give a round of welcome to LaPora Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having me.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into disengagement and leading without authority and a title, I just want to start with you. What's the story behind LaPora Lindsay? What experience and moments along your journey led you to where you are right
Gosh, that's a loaded question because there's so many there are so many stories and things that have led me to this point. And sometimes people ask a question, what was that one moment that kind of got you here? And for me, there is no one moment. There is a multitude of them, different choices, different scenarios. But I will say this, one of the first jobs that I ever had back in college. I had several jobs in college, but there was one particular job where I had a really difficult time with understanding how to add value in that workplace. And long story short, I was only at that job for maybe about 4 months before I got fired. And within that 4 months, I learned so much about communication. I learned so much about the value of the actions that you do, regardless of the title. But it was such an impactful time, both the good and the bad, that it just stayed with me and it embedded with me. And every single job that I had after that point, it has been that first job was a foundation for what I do and how I view the workplace. So, yeah.
now? I love that. So, people sometimes can walk away from a situation like that and either dwell on the what was wrong or point a lot of fingers as well.
Yeah.
And you took that as a building block to learn from.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I probably started off pointing fingers. I mean, like, it's like if I'm going to be honest, like, I'm not going to sit here pretend like I walked away thinking like, oh yeah, this is amazing, and I'm some type of guru. No, I was upset. I was angry, but over time, because that was over 20 years ago. So over time, I did. It became a lot more where I could see both perspectives. Luckily for me, I wrote it down in a journal so I could get into where my mind was at that time, but I could also see it from an outsider's perspective as well. So that's been really beneficial.
I love that. Well, would you mind giving us a little bit of kind of your background, your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that a big bulk of my experience actually comes from being a military spouse. My husband's active duty Navy. And so with that, we have moved 7, maybe 8 times. And that has given me the opportunity to work across industries and different positions and see common themes, whether it was nonprofit, whether it was higher education, whether it was corporate, whether it was a religious affiliation. I have had so much experience, but I kept seeing common themes, regardless of what that industry was. And even though every job that I had dealt with training and it dealt with organizational development, there were still the themes of that human experience where people weren't feeling seen, they weren't feeling heard, and where there were some assumptions, but no one was quite sure what to do. But that's kind of been the bulk of my experience there. And then I have certifications in workforce development. a master's in administration and a bachelor's in organizational communication. So whether it's the personal experience or the knowledge base, I feel like I got it covered.
That's really impressive. Was there anything that felt, I don't know if I want to use the word calling necessarily, but when did the kind of like the light bulb go off or the switch going, I really want to, this is something I'm passionate about, this is something I want to lean into and I want to help others on.
I, I I think it came slowly. I don't think there was any like immediate this is it for me. It was just something over time. A part of it was when we were in Maryland and we were getting ready to move to New Jersey. I had to resign from my job, which was nothing new. But in the process of resigning from my job, just having conversations with other individuals about what are some of the struggles that they have in the workplace, what are some of the struggles that I had in the workplace, and actually this was around the time of COVID, and there was a coworker and myself. We would meet up, whether virtually or in person, and we just went through a list of different things. And one of the things that stood out to me was when we take the time to see it, how we can contribute in the workplace, how we can do something that makes an impact, but none of it was tied to a title or position. So it was around that time, and I guess that was 2020, 2021, where it was just like, I think that this is what I want to do. And actually, that's when I started with my book, and everything else just really developed and grew from there.
Wow. Well, I want to kind of dive into that. Tell a little bit about, why did you decide to write the book? And for those that aren't familiar with it yet, a little bit of background on what the book's about.
Yeah, absolutely. So my book is called Bottom of the Food Chain, a fresh perspective on how your career impact goes outside of your career. And one of the what the book is essentially is about is when we talk about organizational structure, many times we talk about the hierarchical structure in the workplace, which means that there's always someone at the top, whether it is the C-suite or the executive suite, and then you have your middle managers, but you also have those positions that don't really have that proximity, don't really have that proximity to leadership, that visibility that the other typical roles have. And one of the things that's really important about it is even though they don't have that visibility, they still hold great influence. They still hold great power. And throughout the book, I don't want to give it away because I want people to, read the book, but I use the analogy of nature's ecosystem and nature's food chain when we think about trees and plants and all of these things that we just kind of look at and we're just like, what are they doing besides providing oxygen? Like, what else? But when we get a little bit closer, we can see that these organisms, that they are part of that same ecosystem, and they each need each other. So when you look at the wonderful hawk or the lion, like they didn't just become come to be just to come to be. Like they had to get a transference of energy. And so that's kind of, I don't want to get too scientific right now, but just really about how all of those organisms work together and using that as a blueprint for how individuals in the workplace, especially those who may consider themselves emerging leaders or individual contributors or direct reports of any level, to be honest with you, how they can truly make an impact within that ecosystem, regardless of where they are.
Yeah, I absolutely love that analogy. And I think a lot of people can relate to it. A lot of time, unfortunately, the credit can maybe go to somebody with that's the leader, or it gets associated to maybe an owner or someone.
Yeah.
When the reality is, most places, if you look at the experience or the reviews, regardless of the industry, I think people are in, they're not reviewing the technology, and they're not probably have any idea who the owner or the boss
Yeah.
is. The main experiences quite often are somebody without maybe a title, or that experience is caused by maybe people behind the scenes as well. And so I love that take on making sure people understand how important that is. So, you've worked across a lot of variety of jobs and a lot of different industries. So you talk about workplace disengagement. Um, do you think that's a people problem, or do you think that is an operations problem, disengagement or process?
Well, I so when we think about operations or systems, it's for a system to work, it requires the people and the process. And so I would say that it's a systems lens for sure. And what I mean by that is when we are looking at disengagement, one of the questions that we have to ask is what is shaping the behavior before that person shows up? So, what I mean by that is what are unwritten rules or what is happening? What is acceptable? How are people being recognized? How are conversations being had? And this isn't even something that deals with policy or governance in regards to what is actually written, but this is more so of the culture kind of demonstrates what the system is saying. So unwritten rules. And so when we say it's a disengagement is a systems problem, I'll kind of quickly take us through like what this looks like. It starts off with that human experience of you have an employee that is trying to take their contribution and their actions and their effort and create value in the workplace, but they're not seeing that. And so in the process of them not seeing how it's valuable, maybe they get a little bit discouraged and they're feeling a little bit depleted or burnt out because they're doing more and more and more, but it's not in a way that's being translated. And so then you have their supervisors that are now seeing, okay, so this person looks disinterested, this person looks disengaged, right? They're making that assumption that this person no longer really wants to be there, or maybe this person is burnt out. But then when we back out, when we take that lens out just a little bit further, we see that the challenge is that the action of that employee is being misinterpreted as not as workplace value, but it's being not even as a contribution or an effort. And because of that, that person is constantly working and the supervisor is but not in a way that adds value by definition of that organization. And then the supervisor is thinking, well, this person isn't motivated. And so there's all of these things that are moving, and they're moving with unwritten rules, and that's the system. And so when we look at disengagement, going back to that question is what is happening before that person even shows up. And so yes, there are different elements that come into place, but overall it's how all of those things are working together.
I really like that. Good answer. Yeah.
Thanks.
Let's say I have, let's say at my company, I have a disengagement
Yeah.
and I reach out to you for help. Where do you start? And what would you tell me on this is what I can do to fix it?
Right. So one of the places I would start is honestly just looking at what is currently happening. Um, Not rushing in with solutions, not rushing in with, hey, you should probably do this because we don't know. We don't know what that looks like. And then taking the time to look at all of the pieces that are taking part in that system. One of the things that we have to keep in mind is that the reason why structural or systems definitions, why they are so beneficial, is because they are one of the only ways that demonstrates how behavior works in the organization or it works in the system. And so really breaking down when we look at the human experience, when we look at the direct reports or the employees, speaking to them, figuring out what is their experience, what is their expectation, figuring out from middle managers, other managers, what are their experiences, what are their expectations, and then essentially coming up with a clearly defined, this is what the expectations are from direct reports. This is what our managers, this is what's missing. Because many times I've found is that there is that gap that's missing. A couple of years ago, I did some research where I interviewed 25 human resource professionals. Just a really broad question. What are you seeing? They were like, what do you mean? No, what are you saying? Just throw that question out there. And what I heard 18 out of the 25 times was that whenever there is a problem or a challenge, supervisors are skipping straight to the performance plan. Like, hey, we need a PIP, we need a improvement plan for this employee. No conversations were had prior to. There was no clear set definition of this is what is expected or from both parties. And so I think that that would be the first part. And then what happens after that, honestly, it just depends on what answers are given throughout that initial evaluation and feedback stage. So I know that was a long answer, but
Great
that's the
answer.
answer I got.
Yeah, and I mean, you touched on such a important part with that story. I love that story. I wish that wasn't the answer, right? 18 out of 25 said that, but I mean, that resonates completely.
Yeah,
I agree with myself, and working with a variety of leaders over time of all tenures, you definitely see that, and that's unfair on both situations. Um, as you know, that
yeah,
more often than
absolutely.
not, people need crystal clear expectations. They need to understand what we want, but before we even get into that stage, have we helped them? Like, what's holding them
Right.
back? Did the company do their part to give them what they need, the tools, the training, whatever that may be, or maybe a little motivation to understand the purpose behind the work.
Absolutely. And even just going back to that systems lens, like, is the current system in place to recognize what that person is already doing? When we even think about performance management or performance conversation, annual reviews, many times that is about the final outcome. It's not about the ongoing process, what is happening throughout that time. It's goal accomplished, goal not accomplished. And so even that is something that is worth um, considering and defining or redefining clearly, because that sets up everyone for success, both managers and direct reports alike, because now it's the direct reports now understand that this is what is expected. Managers maybe or supervisors now understand that this, not just considering that outcome, but also considering what else may be a hindrance or a help to get this person as they are working towards that goal, even if they haven't yet reached it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Well said, and so extremely valuable lesson for everyone to hopefully take away. So let's say let's say somebody is feeling overlooked or they're burnt out and they're in that position, as you like say, they're working, they don't have a title, and they're trying to figure out, do I leave, do I stay, or what advice do you give to that person?
I would, one of the first things I would say, honestly, is just a question of what has already been done. Um, what I am finding is that many times when individuals are burnt out or tired, they are doing more. They are contributing more, but that doesn't mean that they are contributing more in which the organization or the department finds valuable. Um, Case in point, there was a client who I had worked with previously, and one of the things that they discovered was that there was one particular employee who was just producing, turning over product like it, wildly, like it was great, but that wasn't what they needed. They didn't need productivity in that way, and they needed they needed focus on other projects. But the employee thought that I am producing, so I am I am, creating more, saving time and costs in this way. But that wasn't the primary focus. The focus needed to be in another way. And so when we talk about the misinterpretation of contribution and effort and not seeing it as workplace value, that translation piece is absolutely essential. And that's not, the onus is not on leadership. The onus is not solely on the individual contributor. It is on the direct report individual contributor, them saying, okay, these are the skills and abilities that I have with that I can offer. This is what is needed. Is there a gap? Is there a gap that's there? So to kind of sum up what I, I just said, number one is figuring out what has already been done. Have they done anything prior to? What was working, what didn't work? After they figure that part out, then it's looking at the skills that they have and looking at what is needed, not what you want to provide, but what is needed, and seeing if there's a way to fill those gaps. And I feel like if those two things are done, it will provide a clearer picture for that individual on what they need to do next, which could be a multitude of things. I won't say what it is, but they could do a lot of different things based off of that knowledge that they may have recently gained.
That sounds like a lot of the time the focus on, I won't just use communication, but communication with the purpose of understanding
Yes,
each other and what is needed and what is wanted, and getting hopefully that meet in the middle of both.
absolutely.
So you talk about how to make contribution visible when there isn't, maybe the job titles. And so if I'm a company and I go, maybe that might be something I really am struggling with right now. I worry about my employees um, feeling that value or seeing or their contributions. What can an organization, or what advice would you give somebody in that situation?
In this case, one of the most important things that I've seen work really well is understanding from a direct report or an IC or individual contributor perspective is, what do they consider as recognition? I mean, a lot of times we like to assume that recognition is this award that we are presented with in front of X amount of people, maybe an all hands email or whatever, if it's more virtual. But there are so many other ways to recognize individuals. You have the five love languages. You also have language recognition languages where people feel recognized in the workplace. And so I think that would be number one, is getting that understanding. I know you mentioned that before, is having that understanding, connecting with individuals to figure out what that looks like. And then the other part of that is, in order to understand, we have to have conversations. We have to figure out what's going on. There are so many different jobs where, especially when you get to managerial level, C-suite, you're not going to see the day to day. No one's going to be reporting like, I checked in at XYZ and I answered 50 emails today and put out 35 fires. Like, no, we're not going to be like, that's not how that works, right? But what is important also is what else happened throughout that time. And part of that is developing that relationship, building that relationship in a way where teammates are willing to share a little bit more detail, not to the point of it being useless, but just so there is a clear understanding of what all goes into creating one outcome, right? It's one outcome, but there are maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of different tasks that had to be completed in order for it to get there. And that happens with understanding and building connection with our teammates.
Yeah, great point there. And something that I hope isn't lost upon people that have the ability to give that value and recognition, because um, you don't need the title to do that. You can build a culture around you to recognize. And in fact, I feel like a lot of times the there's so many employees that are making those impacts, or they're a piece of we'll say a wheel, and it takes everyone, even behind the scenes, to make sure everything works. And sometimes, if you're even lucky to get a credit or hear that a good job, it maybe it's the front side and not the back. And it's up to the company to take time to give each other that recognition. Those small wins behind those scenes, those unsung heroes.
Absolutely.
Have you ever seen, a company do that really well, or something unique that a company's done to show that that's a priority?
There is, I wouldn't say there's one company in particular. I what I have seen on a general basis is not necessarily the retention, because there's many reasons why the attrition rate is what it is. Um, but I would say the engagement. It's it is seeing how engaged people are at all levels. And by engagement, it's not just productivity and cost, even though I know that that's something that's extremely important. I when we're talking about it more so from a long-term perspective, it is more so about going back to that misinterpretation piece. Less employees feeling like, or less employees burning out, less disengagement, because they are being recognized, because they are being validated, because there are less assumptions. I would say that that's probably more so of what it looks like, and not necessarily any particular organization that I see over others. And that's just because there's always influxes. When you have a new person, you have a different dynamic, and those unwritten rules are now rewriting themselves. So that's why I would keep it more generic, just for that very reason.
I love what you said. The unwritten rules are rewriting themselves. Well said.
Yes.
Well put. Um, I hate to get into use the ROI word in a conversation like this, but you know, for some organizations, they're going to look at what's the importance of bringing this in, or why should I focus on this? If I came and said, tell me right now, what is going to be the biggest impact if I lean into this and we prioritize this, and what can we expect to see?
I mean, when you have engaged employees, when you have employees that are not burnt out, it's going to increase productivity. There are other factors as well, but those are going to be two primary factors. And with productivity comes the financial increase. And I don't know a company out there that is not interested in what does that financial increase look like. There was a report, Workplace Institute, and it mentioned that 75% of the reasons individuals quit or disengage are preventable. And this says a lot about, if you have the right tools in place, if you understand your system as is, you not only understand it as is, but also understand what part you play, what part each person plays in changing it. You are going to be able to decrease that percentage, decrease the time costs of trying to make it up by hiring additional employees, or maybe even filling positions because you're just not getting enough productivity. So that's what I would say, is that even though engagement is the forefront, that's not the end goal. It's going to go back to what are those business outcomes. But I can guarantee you, every single time when you work your way back to the core, it's going to be engagement. Just about, I would say, maybe 18 out of 25 times, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, I hate even asking that question because
Yeah.
I think I know well enough to understand it if the employee's engaged and they feel valued and seen and cared about, they're gonna put more into their work. I was, the picture popped in my head while you're talking. If we had two employees and they did the exact same work week after week, same amount of hours, same output, same productivity, and one of those employees, the leader, was checking in on making sure they knew how important their work is and the impact it made, and the other one went by day in, day out, without hearing anything for weeks, maybe months on end. Which work over time would we anticipate is going to be much better? And it seems simple when you think of it in that perspective, but it's so, going by a day to day and watching people not maybe get that appreciation, that recognition, and that impact, and just go, well, let's just come in and do a job. It's a sad reality.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a sad reality, and but it's something that is, when we look at the companies who are, when you look at the Gallup reports or the McKinsey and Co. or the McLean reports, Workplace Institute, we see time and time again as we look at these surveys that there there are so many costs that come with, or loss that come when we simply overlook this piece. And there are so many wins, financial wins, morale wins, when we focus on the the people who are completing the processes within the system. So yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel you go through history and think of any high performing team. It doesn't matter what they were accomplishing, whether it's a big project, a breakthrough company, almost every single time you hear this story and it's this completely passionate group that wants to win, but that passion really comes from the engagement and that, feeling valued no matter what that role is. And without that, those stories don't happen. So if you're if I'm an organization, there's other organization, and a leader is trying to decide if they should bring in LaPora Lindsay, and why should they? And I guess what makes your approach different than maybe other leadership or other coaches?
Well, to answer that question, I'm actually going to answer it with why they shouldn't bring me in. And I say that, so if someone is looking for a really quick, this is a quick fix solution, don't bring me in. That I'm not the person for you. And the reason why I say that is because there's this really good quote, and it says that if you solve a problem quickly, the one thing you can be certain of is that you will leave that situation exactly as you entered that situation. And when you break that down, you look at, when we're talking about systems and structures, this is not something that is an easy, this is on the leaders or this is on the direct reports. This is something that requires everyone. And so if you are looking for a long-term solution, and what I mean by that is not me consistently coming in, but if you're looking for something that it takes effort and it takes some, hey, this is going to be a hard conversation, but it's going to show the benefits over time, bring me in for that. Bring me in to not just speak with the leaders, but to speak with the emerging leaders. Bring me in if if you are looking for an opportunity for everyone to see how they are accountable, how everyone can see how they can take ownership, how everyone can see the part that they play in the system as it is, and where the system can be. I feel that that is what makes me different, is that I'm looking at this from a systems lens, and a system lens requires everyone's input, requires everyone actions, and my keynotes and my training do just that. It ensures that everyone knows what part they play, and everyone is looking at how can they impact and take ownership of their role.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
I've got another question to ask
Okay.
for that, because you touched on the keynote part and that what you give. I want you to give, if you will, a little secret sauce. Like, what is one of the things that you love talking about in one of your favorite keynotes
Okay.
that you can share right now that people are going to be like, yes, that is fantastic?
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I know I hit you on the spot with
Secret sauce. No,
that.
no, no. You did, but it's okay. I will say this. I'm trying to see, how can I say it without saying it? So I'll put it like this. I have not always been bald. And I know y'all probably like, what? But there's a point. I've not always been bald. I had hair, and up until about 6 years ago, I used to wear wigs all of the time. And in one of my keynotes, I share how the loss of a wig is reflective of how we oftentimes view ourselves. And if you're saying, well, I don't wear wigs, what are you talking about? That doesn't even make sense. Imagine if maybe you needed a mint and you didn't have a mint, or you needed makeup and you didn't have makeup, or you needed your glasses and you didn't have your glasses. And even though it's something that is so basic, so common, that is the secret sauce to getting people to see just how powerful they can be and how they can take ownership and accountability, is by understanding the loss of a wig in public.
I
Yeah.
love that. That was good. I'm glad I asked that. Man, great story. So, I guess to kind of tie a bow on it, you've been doing this for a while now. And how has this made an impact on you personally? We've talked a lot about the impact you're making and what you can do for others, but what's been the most rewarding part of the work you're doing?
The most rewarding part, honestly, is oh gosh, there's so many. Oh gosh, there's so many. So I'll try to choose two.
You're good.
I would say one of them being, it is a very humbling process. No, it's very humbling, and what I mean by that is I learn so much every single time that I have the opportunity to present. From the questions that I get, from the feedback that I get, it gives me an opportunity to answer those, but to also, like, wow, okay, what else can I offer? What else is going to be beneficial to the audience? Because even though I'm coming with keynotes and workshops, it's not about what is going to make me look good. It is about ensuring that the audience, the participants that I'm speaking to, that I'm working with, that you all are getting what you need from that conversation. And so it's very humbling for me, because it's not about me. While I may be delivering the message, I am studying and preparing and researching based on what the need is. And the other part is the teaching aspect. Even though I'm speaking, I still consider myself an educator at heart, where one of the best ways to ensure you know your stuff is to share it with others. And so to be able to have the opportunity to share something consistently over and over again and again, and going back to that feedback and having those conversations online, offline, that has just been such a wonderful experience. And I'm an introvert. And so it has changed me in that way, where I am so excited to have these conversations. I'm so excited to learn. And it because before you wouldn't about 10 years ago, you could not find me anywhere except at home. But with with this career opportunity, it's been changing in that way. So two really great things, the humbling piece, but also the teaching and learning and growing as I share whatever that message is that is needed by the participants or the audience at the time.
Well, those audiences are very lucky if they've ever got to see any of your keynotes before. And if they hadn't, I definitely recommend that they consider making sure they make it to one of your next conferences or booking you. I just want to tell you thank you for sharing your story and for giving some of the secret sauce away on the show. I plan on, we will list for all you listening, there'll be a link to LaPora Lindsay's website, her LinkedIn, and also definitely a link to her book. You got to take a look at Bottom of the Food Chain. So that will be on there as well. And yeah, I just want to say thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on the Amplify Speakers podcast.
Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks.